Okay, hello everybody. Um, so I was checking the forums and some people are asking about using um, buff bars to keep track of debuffs. And I wanted to showcase what I do. I also wanted to do this because maybe some people have a more optimal way of doing it because this is definitely not perfect. So yeah. So the way I do it is the combination of buff bars and combat analysis, which I'm sure many of are familiar with. I don't like effect sliders. I just use effect windows. As you can see, I've got nothing here because I like a pretty minimalistic setup. I don't like to have a lot of UI in my in my screen. So I just blacklisted almost everything. Now, what you need is to have buff bars and then also have combat analysis, which is another plugin. And then within combat analysis, you can, for instance, go to, or first you pick a line because you're going to have to set manually the durations for all the debuffs for each line because, of course, not every debuff lasts the same in every line. And legacies also affect them. So anyway, we can start with CC. Some of these are by default correct, but some aren't. So for instance, I believe these were correct, just came in with a plugin. So if I throw Blinding Flash, now this is dazed for 30 seconds. So this works quite alright. One of the many issues I have here is that if you daze many targets with the same name, because of how it appears in combat analysis, that it just says the Dale lands wolf. If I get another wolf and I daze him, it will refresh in buff bars as the same daze. It won't recognize it as two different mobs. So that's one of the issues I don't know how to circumvent, and if anybody has any advice, I'd gladly take it. So that's one of the things you can do. Then, for instance, you can do the same with roots. Herblore 30 seconds, then Cracked Earth 33, because that's another thing I wasn't able to do. I wasn't able to make it apply the root upon expiration. Rather, what you get is this. So you get the debuff from Cracked Earth and the root both at the same time. So in order to make the root coincide with the root duration, I had to make it last 33 seconds. Then if you move over to like debuffs, you can go like to a sign of power command, and if you have the legacy, you can change the duration so that it actually reflects the duration that the skill actually has. So in my case, 80 seconds. Yeah, exactly. Then the other sign of power also shows up. You can find it here and modify the duration. Then if you want to do Fire Lore and Frost Lore, you see there they show up. Now, one thing that is interesting is if you go into Fire Lore, for instance, and you can put applied by Fire Lore and Wind Lore, right? And then you can go into Frost Lore and do the same. What this will do is if you have pre-applied them, you just use Wind Lore, and of course these will refresh. However, I'll let these expire and then show you what happens if I just use Wind Lore on a target that doesn't have Fire Lore or Frost Lore. And it will show you as if they do have it. It also doesn't count resists. Like, it will detect if you use Fire Lore and Fire Lore is resisted. I think it will detect if you use Wind Lore and Wind Lore is resisted. However, you can use Wind Lore and like Wind Lore not be resisted, but the application of Fire Lore or the application of Frost Lore be resisted, and buff bars will not detect that. So that's another thing that is not ideal about this setup. So like if I use Wind Lore now, it is telling me it has everything, and we can tell it doesn't have Fire Lore and Frost Lore. So there are many problems with this setup. It is mostly good for dazes if you're keeping track of one target. I also haven't been able to have it keep track of my stun immunity on allies. So it will keep track of stun immunity on myself. You see, there it shows up. Because it tracks buffs on yourself. However, if I were to use stun immunity on my bear, now whenever it refreshes, here's my bear. Anvil, people, anvil. Okay, so I used stun immunity on my bear and nothing happened. Because of course it's keeping tabs on the buffs on allies. It would just fill up your whole thing. You'd have to blacklist everything except stun immunity. So yeah, that's the way I've got it set up. I don't know if other people have other setups which are better. Of course, it will also detect stuns. Like if I do that, yeah, you can put all your stuns in here. Is my yellow line, so of course stuns are a bit longer. Um, so yeah, if you go into red line with deep enough yellow to get the stun trait, I think Ents goes up to like 8.5 seconds or something like that. So yeah, that's the setup I've got. If anybody wants to replicate it, and if there is something I forgot to explain, just let me know. And if anybody has something that they consider to be better, also let me know, because I'm more than interested in having a clean setup that shows me the duration on all debuffs and CC and that is useful.